every hurdle put forth by pandemic, DME Media School, in association with School of Communication and Creative Arts, Deakin University, Melbourne, Australia, left no stone unturned to carry on its annual tradition of holding its international conference. Yes, we are here for the second edition of the world's first 10-day digital live international conference, ICAN4. Good afternoon, everyone. I, Ishika Vadhwa, with my co-host Yogesh Bisht, students of first year DME Media School, welcome you all to the 8th day and the 5th panel discussion of this inspiring conference. The theme for ICANN this year is Information, Communication, and Artificial Networks, and our hashtag for the conference is Communication Redefined. We are proud to announce that our conference this year is being supported by Indian Council of Social Science Research, ICSSR. The former editions of ICANN were indeed inspiring. The theme for the first edition of ICANN in March 2018 was India and Changing Aspects of News, followed by the second edition in November 2018 based on Indian cinema and alternate networks. For the third edition held in 2020, ICANN was all about issues of community, agenda, news with the hashtag Conference for Change. ICANN 4 would not have been possible without the support of our partners. Our knowledge partners are K.R. Mangalam University, Gurugram, Haryana, Adamas University, Kolkata, Makhanlal Chaturvedi National University of Journalism and Mass Communication, Bhopal, and Vigyan Prasar, Government of India. We have also partnered with Department of Communication and Journalism, Guwahati University as our academic partner. Our international partner is Institute for International Journalism, E.W. Scripps School of Journalism, Ohio University, USA, and our media partners is the Policy Times. ICANN is a flagship conference of DME Media School and today has made an international name for itself. We have participation of about 60 eminent scholars from 5 continents and 11 countries, namely India, South Korea, Malaysia, Singapore, Bangladesh, USA, Mexico, France, Italy, Australia, and Ghana. More than 100 media educators and researchers have gathered to present their papers in the conference. There are 36 live sessions scheduled, including 9 technical sessions, 3 workshops, 7 panel discussions, 3 special sessions, and 10 master classes. And how wonderful it is that all the 9 technical sessions are being chaired and co-chaired by women scholars representing different states of the country. We would also like to tell everyone that at DME, we have our student council, SPARK, Students with Positive Attitude and Resonating Communication. We also have our official newsletter named Journalism at DME, a fortnightly publication that covers all the major activities happening in and out the campus. It is a student-centric newsletter carried out entirely by them under the supervision of the faculty members. DME TV is our official YouTube channel where you can find the playlist related to all our events, lecture series, film festivals, and all conferences. It gives me great pleasure to inform everyone that we are live on our official Facebook page right now. For more information, follow us on our social media handles. Links are being shared in the chat box. Now, we would like to request Professor Dr. Ambrish Saxena, Dean DME Media School, Director, DME Studios and Production, Director International Relations, Delhi Metropolitan Education, Noida, to please say a few words.
Thank you. This is the 8th day and we are meeting in this afternoon. So many panel discussions, master classes have happened. But this is one panel discussion which we always look for. Dr. Gauri Chakravarti has been so kind always that whenever we organize this annual event, this international conference, ICANN, and the International Film Festival, SIFI, she is always ready with something which is unique, which is different, and which always add value to whatever we do as part of the whole extravaganza. So again, this panel discussion has been conceived by her, which is about episodic storytelling and the Indian spectator. So though this theme of the conference is information, communication, and artificial network, and we have been focusing in many of the sessions about the technological aspect, about the digital aspect, about artificial intelligence. But then when we talk about information and communication, then somewhere we have to talk about content and the delivery of content or the transmission of the content. And that is where the cinema or television or entertainment, they always come to the fore. This morning only, we had a discussion, panel discussion, which was again planned by Dr. Vikrant Kishore from Deakin University, Australia, which was about Indian cinema in Australia. So that unfolded many such aspects as to how cinema in terms of production, reception, distribution is doing in other countries. But then the kind of changes which are happening in the in films, in cinema, and in television serials or the web series, this is something which is of interest to us all, and we always try to understand more and more as to what all is there as far as the formatting or the production side is concerned. So I am sure that we will get to know many more things, many new things in this session. So I stop here, and we all are eager to listen to our learned panelists in this session. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for those kind words. Now we invite Ms. Sukriti Arora, Assistant Professor, DME Media School, to tell us more about today's panel discussion and our panelists. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ishika. The subject of today's panel discussion is episodic storytelling and short format Dyad, the Indian Spectator. In India, storytelling has been an integral part of our lives since forever. Its methods and means continue to change over a period of time, but for a prolonged period, cinema managed to establish itself as the mainstream. However, we are now observing a break in this theme, in this pattern with time and technology. Today, the panel discussion will explore changing paradigm of storytelling in India and trace the loci of the Indian spectator within the dyad of a new storytelling culture. We have a panel of distinguished guests to enlighten us about the subject. I extend the heartiest welcome to Dr. Gauri Chakravarti, Joint Acting Head and Associate Professor, Amity School of Communication, Amity University, Noida, who has graciously agreed to chair the discussion today. Dr. Chakravarti graduated from the renowned Film and Television Institute of India, Pune, with the distinction of receiving Dada Saheb Phalke Memorial Student Award, along with a scholarship. She has been part of the audio video industry since 1995 and worked with noteworthy names like BBC WST and DD Metro. She has also been a media educator for the last 16 years and even spearheaded the filmmaking and film studies department at ASCO Amity University. Ma'am was the festival director for the 15th edition of the IWAT Asian Women's Film Festival 2019. During her long-standing career, ma'am has been a part of several jury panels, led several successful projects in different fields, and naturally won numerous accolades for her contributions. Thank you so much, ma'am, for being here today. On the panel, we also have Mr. Rakesh, veteran filmmaker and film educator. In an eventful career spanning over 2 decades, Mr. Pankaj has been involved with diverse media platforms and filmmaking. Alumnus of the second batch from MCRC Jamia Millia Islamia, he has worked in almost all filmmaking centers across India on wide-ranging international projects within the country and overseas as well. He is a published photographer and author and currently engages in training filmmaking students and media aspirants in reputed institutions across the country. I welcome you, sir. We also have with us Ms. Piali Das Gupta Satish, playwright, dramaturgist, and director and founder of Hiji Biji Collective. She is an expressive arts individual practitioner trained in storytelling, art, music, narrative therapy, psychodrama, playback theatre, dance movement psychotherapy, palliative care counseling, hypnotherapy, and reflective teamwork. As a playwright and director, she has created works like this show, This Is How We Live in 2017, My Darling Clementine in 2018, and Suicide Note in 2019. Voices in Our Head, her first documentary film, was premiered and showcased as one of the 53 international films at Vibgyor International Film Festival, Kerala in 2013. She is a member of RIC International, a group of 1,000 international professional storytellers from across 47 countries. Ma'am is also a widely published writer. Isa and Her Friends, The Bully Gully Scare was her first novella for children. Her writings have also been published by Bosch New York, Homegrown, Medium, Youth Ki Awaz, Vagabond, Shiros, and so on. Thank you so much for joining us today, ma'am. The next name on our panel is Mr. Murtaza Ali Khan, a renowned film critic and journalist. He is the film editor of the New York-based magazine Cafe Dissensus. He currently contributes to leading publications like The Hindu and the Sunday Guardian. He has also written for Daily O, Huffington Post India, News Laundry, and The Quint. He has also served as a jury member for the first FISFA International Film and Arts Festival in 2018. Mr. Murtaza is widely followed on social media for his blog posts and shares on Indian cinema. Welcome to ICAN4, sir. And our final member on this esteemed panel is Mr. Himanshu Dubai, a reputed cinematographer. Mr. Dubai completed his Master of Film and TV Production from Amity University, Noida, and then joined the New York Film Academy for their one-year cinematography. He continued to work in New York after his graduation in 2012 and shot a number of short films. Since his return to Mumbai in 2013, he has shot several commercials, web series, and television shows. He has also shot full-length features such as Guju Bhai the Great, a Gujarati feature film which made a major success. His two offbeat television shows, Reporters and Aramb with Goldie Behel, are some of his other noteworthy creations. Mr. Dubey loves to craft stories through his lens. Thank you for joining us today, sir. And now, without further ado, I ask and request Dr. Gauri Chakravarti to commence the panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Sukriti, and a lot of blessings to Ishika. Ishika, that was a wonderful start from a student. It's always so inspiring to see a student begin, a formal session. So lots of blessings to you. A good afternoon and a warm welcome to everybody who's across this little frame and watching us from wherever they are. I must start by saying that it's a privilege to curate for ICAN. And Dr. Saxena and Dr. Shashibala, they are really inspiring in the way they get the community of media and entertainment professionals and academicians together to create this, mega opus called ICAN. And one feels that this is a fine opportunity to discuss the current evolution of media and entertainment in this country. And I come here both as an academician and as a practitioner, and it's a privilege to be here. So today, the panel, the illustrious panel that we have, has a very important task at hand. And the task is that we are going to engage in a conversation which dissects a crucial element of the much discussed, quote unquote, content. In fact, in our pre-production or pre-session conversations, me and Pankaj sir were talking about how subscription is also being driven by peer comments.
Hello, that's a very difficult task to take over from Pankaj sir and Gauri ma'am. I think the brief that I have and the documents that we have received, I think we are basically here to just talk about content in general, of how it has evolved over time and how we've reached a point where there are multiple points of consumption and formats and structures that exist. And also then talk about how form in terms of how it has changed and evolved across all these formats. And now in terms of the new structures of the episodic entertainment system, where a lot of content is now spread over multiple episodes and we have the choice of consuming them all in one go or consume as we want, the, as you call, content on demand system that we've now come to. How does that affect or changed the way the stories are told. What does it imply? What does it call for in terms of telling those stories and how to make those stories viable for these mediums, along with exploring a lot of newer storytelling mediums where instead of filmmakers where everybody gets to be the storyteller that they want to be, with newer social media formats that have turned into sort of a space where you can have a similar episodic structure for content that a lot of people have now started up as. I think it started off as merely something like sketches. And now I think it has turned into a very powerful system of very potent storytelling that's happening out there, where mostly it's just one person or two people just telling all the stories, different kinds of scenarios, reenacting them. So I think that's also part of our discussion. But I would really probably say that let's just wait for them to be back in the discussion, because a lot of it is supposed to be led by her.
Yeah. So because the structure was already shared by her, and it's best that if she takes over.
Also, the thing is, all of us panelists have a very different discussion to contribute towards. She has different questions and a different set of discussion to bring on.
I think he's joined.
Gauri ma'am has rejoined.
So getting back to what I was saying, and I'll resume from where I left. So we were talking about how, the experience is immersive, the palette of choices like never before. And what I find very interesting as a social scientist is that many of our social taboos are getting busted simultaneously, and that has a direct impact on storytelling. So if I were a spectator today, I would notice, and I'm sure you all are noticing that choices are being acknowledged, that good content is being earmarked, that cost and competitiveness are being treated as healthy signs. And because this conference is about artificial intelligence, we also do know that the spectator is cued in or given a stimulus to look at content which is similar to what they've experienced. That is another angle to this large landscape. And there is a lot of quantitative data out there. There is BARC data, a lot of analysis has gone into it. But what we want to do on this panel today is to dig deep into the quality. And what's really interesting about this, so how did I think of the word dyad? And the reason is, if you look at a 180-degree line, and if Himanshu would think of it, he'd think of the invisible line that you use in in shoots, but I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying an imaginary line latitudinally. If we think of content, on one side is this episodic content, which is huge in its manifestation, and it's constructed in a way where it's capsular. There are segments that are put in a row. You might binge it 7 hours on one weekend, but the fact is that it has been constructed in a different manner. And on the other side, there seems to be the shortest. There's another direction that is being created every day, and this direction is, though it is diagrammatically opposite, here you also have the involvement of the spectator. So the spectator also is having the right to, create narratives on this huge, mobile telephony that is opening up, and the numbers are humongous. So I am going to refer to this as the dyad, and the panel will celebrate this dyad. The panel celebrates the Indian spectator. And all of this started by me thinking, what is a story? Why do we listen to stories? And what are the transcendental elements that stay with you as you kind of experience stories? And we know that storytelling is as old as time. Stories are reflective of the politics of space, representation. Stories are upholders of values. And that's why I was bringing in the social taboos, because that's an area which has completely got busted, if I may use that term. Stories are also subservient to the rulers of the time. And we shall be experiencing that in the coming years when we see more control on the storytelling that happens in this big space, which is driven by technology. And sometimes I feel stories do indicate the fetish of a community. So the dyad has existed always. We are the land of the katha, the adhyayas, the khands, the small little segments, and we're also the land of the short story as a folk tale. So the Indian Spectator there has had that mix for eternity. If you look at the dyad in the 80s and the 90s, you have two opposing forces, and I'm sure Pankaj sir will wet that because he's seen the medium from when it almost was at its nascent stage. Pankaj sir has been around since the 1980s at this medium. And so there was television on one side, and then there was cinema after the Asiads. And research will indicate that whenever television had progressive content, cinema ended up having something very regressive, something very stereotypical. And when in the mid 90s, cinema lived up to the occasion and looked at a shorter, a progressive kind of, storytelling, it was television which moved into the classic soap operas of the traditional style. So I feel even that is a dyad. And I'm trying to place for the audiences who are listening to us right now that, we have to really dig into the landscape of this conversation before we talk about the galaxy of storytelling that we see. I'm also fascinated by the appropriation of cultural references that happen. So if you see a Sacred Games, if you see a Asur, the long formats, you will notice that constantly they are hitting on collective memory and in turn creating a new collective memory. So we feel as a panel, and all four of us or five of us strongly are from that domain. We really, with humility, feel that over the next 1.5 hours, we will be able to converse, and maybe that will lead or leave you with certain substantial aspects of storytelling. Remember that some of these things we always think we know, but when we get to storytelling, when we as media professionals get to storytelling, we snap. Our stories don't turn so effective. So what are the reasons? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to begin with Mr. Pankaj Rakesh. As I told you, Pankaj sir has seen the entire cycle. And Pankaj sir, my first question to you, and what we are going to do is in this panel, we will give the first 5 minutes to each panelist, and then we'll move in a more, a dialogue, a discourse kind of a conversation. So Pankaj sir, I begin with you. And, one of my first, curiosity is that as, you engaged in education as well as in the practice, we always talk about linear, non-linear, and circular narratives. But to me, it seems that the whole concept of evolving of the story format has happened in a certain direction. This is also subsequent to all that's happening around, this entire overlap of whatever we were talking, the experiences. So Pankaj sir, over to you. I would love for you to comment on how you perceive this construction of the story. And for all the young audiences right now who are out there, what will be their takeaway from the session, sir? Yes.
Thank you also for making me feel very George Orwellian. It's a bit of Animal Farm and The Big Brother, but thank you so much.
No, you're still not fossilized.
Left to you in the next 1 week. Having said that, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me as a part of this panel. It's a pleasure to meet up with Dr. Saxena, Dr. Bala. It's good to be here. We met almost a year ago, 29th of June, ICAN4. We were talking about the influx, and suddenly the Indian populace had discovered something called the OTT platforms last year. And it was all thanks to, or no thanks to, COVID and the pandemic that we discovered what the benefits and the boon of the OTT. So far, they've been a boon. I hope they will remain thus. So you spoke about how things have always been this way. So for me, the biggest story, the greatest story, the most perfectly written story ever told is our own epic, the Mahabharata. So if you look at Mahabharata purely as a story, forget the religiosity of it, forget the religious context of it, it's purely somehow the best written story. If you look at each character, you look at each character arcs, you look at the dramaturgy that is involved, you look at the complexity of the story structure, it's all there. The basic element of any good story is you have a protagonist. The protagonist has a goal, and then there are complications or obstacles that are strewn in the path of the protagonist, how he, she, or they achieve that goal or reach or accomplish that goal. And that is there in abundance in Mahabharata. So for me, that is the perfect story. Even if you go back to the good old 3-act structure, the Mahabharata fits in perfectly well. Except, unlike a regular 100-minute, 120-minute film, your 10% is of Act 1. So, with 17 or 18 huge books, each that thick of the Mahabharata, those many chapters or those many booklets of the entire story, it'll take us some time to get to where the first act actually begins and ends for Mahabharata. But it's an amazing story, told very, very well, written very, very well. So now, having said this, let me just take a step back and give you guys a few figures. I hate doing this because this is purely about content, but all of you should talk about figure. And for the lack of a figure myself, I find it very important to talk about figures. Our OTT subscription base in India has gone up 3 times in less than 1 year. We started off with the, can I have that slide if it's possible? We had a 8 million subscription base in April last year, right? And we've gone up to 25 million subscribers in India, right? And if you look at how this has, you'll be surprised to know that between Disney Hotstar and Netflix or Amazon, they control 50% of the subscriber base in India. No, everybody, we keep talking about Netflix, but we are only 7% of the subscription base in India, Netflix. Disney Hotstar has 41, Eros now has 24, Amazon 9, Z5 and Alt Balaji 4 each, and Sony Live only 3. Right? Thank you. And, no, we don't need this right now. Thank you. Can I just have my camera back on, please? And the interesting thing here, again, for all of us to note, is that PwC and E&Y have carried out many studies on this. And why am I giving you these figures is to arrive at this. The 3 primary service drivers across Indian OTT platform subscribers are all content-driven reasons. The first one is because they want to watch a specific program. That is 31%. The range of content available on that particular platform is 30%. And the quality and original content is 29%. So that's a total of 90% is all content driven. So what is driving you, me, Himanshu, or Murtaza, or anybody else, or Piali, to watch a particular platform or call that a particular favorite platform is content. And the way we are presenting content, like you rightly said, Gauri, a lot of social taboos are gone. They've been cast aside. We are moving forward. A lot of forces are trying to rein us in, take us back, preferably to the cave ages. But so far, we've been able to resist that, and we are moving forward. So let's look at what we did initially. How did we write our stories? How did we compose our stories? So can I have that slide, please, now? The next slide, the 3-act structure. So here is a 3-act structure. We talk about the 3-act structure, which has been around since Aristotle, right? Aristotle talked about it. Mr. William Shakespeare propagated it. So if you look at that, thank you. Yeah. So if you look at the 3-act structure, this is what it looks like. Let me give you, remind you, take your attention, draw your attention to a very interesting 20th century Fox film called Phone Booth, starring Colin Farrell. At the 11th minute of the film, Colin Farrell is trapped inside a 2-foot by 2-foot phone booth in New York, right? And he's trapped inside that phone booth in a city in the US, for, let's say that, and till the end, he does not come out of that. And that's your Act 1. Your Act 1 talks about the inciting incident. It talks about introduction to the genre of the film, introduction to the locale, introduction to the characters. All of that is finished in Act 1. And that's like a typically copybook written screenplay. Act 2 is where all your subplots emerge, all the other stories emerge. And that's what happens in Phone Booth 2. The truth begins to unravel. Who this person is, this smooth talking, street smart fixer that Colin Farrell plays in that suddenly begins to unravel. That character totally unravels. And then, of course, is the climax and the resolution, right? So if we can lose that slide, please. We can come back to the camera. Thank you. Now, this was good as far as feature films were concerned. This didn't work out because of episodic content. Or episodic content needed something different. Episodic content, you need to grab the eyeballs in the first 90 seconds. If you do not grab your audience within the first 90 seconds, they have a simple thing called a remote. So either they're going to change what they are watching, or they're going to change the platform that they are seeing. They're going to zap you out of their existence for the next 1 hour or so, right? So whereas a film, you had 11 minutes, 15 minutes, the first 20 minutes to grab the eyeballs, to grab the interest of the viewer. In episodic content, you have only 90 seconds, which is why American TV writers are probably the highest paid tribes anywhere in the world, because they have to keep reinventing the wheel every day for you. They have to come up with something interesting. They have to take the plot forward. For God's sake, I mean, Friends had 11 or 14 seasons, right? So they took those characters and they kept helping them grow across so many years. They kept us company, right? So the episodic content, the first act or the 3-act structure was not going to work for episodic content. Hence, people started improvising. So then they came up with something called the PCR. Now, the PCR was not the police control room gypsy that hangs around outside suspicious turns, but this was a problem. Then there is a complication, and the R was the resolution, PCR. So, which is also a same thing, which is a result of your 3-act structure. So you had a problem. The problem got complicated further, and then you had a result or a resolution. So when episodic writing came into being and started getting more and more popular, you needed something else to take you forward. You needed a hook at the end of that episode that would ensure that you would watch the next episode, or that you would pine and long for the next episode. So then came another C, so it became PCRC. So problem, complication, resolution. And then came the second C, which was a cliffhanger, right? So which is why we do binge watching, which is why you're saying, okay, I'm going to sleep. It's 1 a.m. I have to get up. I have to take a class, or I have to go out for a shoot tomorrow, or I have something else to do. But no, and there's something else interesting that happens right towards the last 3 to 4 minutes, or the last couple of minutes of that episode, that wants you to go back again and again, right? So that's what happened with as a refinement of the original 3-act structure. So you got into a PCRC, and people started following that in terms of content writing, the evolution of content writing. Then very recently, a gentleman called Dan Harmon, who was the showrunner of a very popular cult show called Community, because he had studied in a community college in LA, he wrote Community, and he also wrote Rick and Morty, very, very popular, and they have their own major following over the social media. They're very popular. For some don't like them at all. He came up with a 8-quadrant structure called the story circle. And he thought that was something which is a better way of writing story content, formatting story content. And he called it the story circle. I'm just going to share that with you. So what he thought was that the story circle could not only just apply to the entire episode, it could apply to each scene. And that was the beauty of the story circle. So he calls them embryos. The term that he uses for his story circles are embryos. So he says these embryos, and every time he keeps watching soaps, he keeps watching different episodes all the time, and he tries to keep formatting these and plotting these against his story circle and seeing if they work or not. And more often than not, they have worked for him, right? So could I have slide number 4, please?
So very distinct from the 3-act structure. And I
That's
think
right.
this is a takeaway for everybody who's listening.
He says the character is in a zone of comfort. He is where he is, or she is where they are, or there are a bunch of people. The protagonist is there in a zone of comfort, but they want something, right? They want to achieve something. Something has happened that has set them off. And then they move. So this upper half of the circle is familiar territory. The lower half of the circle is what he called an unfamiliar situation or the other world. So you begin on a zone of comfort. They want something. The character wants something. The protagonist wants something. He sets off. He decides, or she decides, to set off on this adventure. He enters, or she enters, a very unfamiliar situation or a zone, adapts to it, starts looking for something that they want, gets what they want, pays a heavy price for it. And then they return to their own world. And here is the biggest change that Dan Harmon brought about. He says, having changed, they are never going to be the same ever again. Colin Farrell is trapped in that phone booth, but when he comes out, gone are his philandering ways, gone are his sweet, smooth talking ways. He is a changed person. And that was the biggest, this is what I call in Indian context, the rain effect. Safedi ki chamkar. You know, bar, that's what has happened to that character. If you can just play the black one, please.
And sir, I'll also be the bad timekeeper.
Yes.
We are at 4:16, sir. So I just
need
want to
a
remind
minute
you.
more.
Yes.
A minute and a half max, and then I'll be done. So these are the same 8 points. And what he talks about in terms of the character, this is simplified, and he talks about in a much shorter form. He says there is a character, the character has a need, he sets off search, he finds or she finds what they want, takes what they have come to get, and returns back having changed. So it's you, need, go, search, find, take, return, totally changed, right? So this is what a lot of people are following now. They are structuring their stories on Dan Harmon's story circle. I'm also teaching an undergrad class of film writing, and I asked my students, some of them wrote this, and they actually plotted their stories on this circle, and they turned out to be rather nice. You can take this off, please. To just sum up what we have said, storytelling has become very democratized. right? Storytelling has blurred boundaries. We are happy watching Mexican content, Peruvian content, Danish content, Swedish content, content from Sri Lanka. I've seen content. I love watching content from South Africa. It's very nice, very edgy, very raw, very different from what we are doing. The characters are very different, right? So the boundaries have blurred. Some of us who were around when the first satellite phones came and when the first mobile phones came up in the world, Motorola had this very interesting tagline, which I'm going to repeat now. They said, when geography became history. And that's what is happening now. It's a repeat. I mean, it's amazing how life just recirculates the same thing again. What has now happened is, we don't worry about where the content is coming from. As long as there are subtitles available, you're happy to watch that content. Content has changed. Last year, exactly when on ICAN4, I spoke about, different channels giving you different offerings. Alt Balaji has a USP. MX Player has a USP. Netflix has their own USPs. But, people are getting, there's an initial curiosity, then they are going to get fully fed up of all this content. And then they're going to look for good stories. They're going to look for wonderful stories which they want to share with others. And today there is nothing better, like with anything else, any other service or product, word of mouth publicity.
Very true.
To socialize, the first thing you want to know is, okay, have you seen something interesting? What is the last thing you saw? Or, Himanshu, you have to see Queens of Joburg.
And so on that note, I'm going to move to Piali, because I think, this sentence is so critical to what we are going to talk to Piali about. For the audiences, I'm going beyond what has been shared about her, as a formal introduction. But if you look at her work, one of the greatest aspects of her work is that she takes this stance on storytelling, which is personalized. And not only has this been, appropriated across media platforms, she is also someone who is, as a dramaturgist, engaged with storytelling for care. And I find that extremely fascinating. So Piali, I'm going to, Pankaj sir has set the stage. And, like I told you, today we are going to imagine this 180-degree line. He's talked about one side of it. But what I really want to, I'm curious about in knowing your views is that from your point of view, how do you look at storytelling as this critique on the sociopolitique? We are talking about needs and wants, but after all, these characters are from the spaces we exist in. So what would be your comments on this function of storytelling, in a given society, and especially today, where the Indian spectators are exposed to this lavish palette across platforms?
Thank you so much, Gauri. Really, really privileged to be here. Thank you to you, to the DME Media School, ICAN conference, to my co-esteemed panel members. I would like to keep it short and precise and, jump into the point. The first thing which I really believe with in my 2 decades of work, which I see kind of coming up again and again, is that whatever we have done till now, in the last 2 years, all that is irrelevant. The pandemic has completely changed the context of things. So, it's a new way of doing, learning, knowing, and there's a lot of unknown, which is very fascinating for me. And pandemic has changed our behavior. So the stories which we tell, the stories which we connect to, the stories which we get hooked to, they are so different. And it's just, I remember working with different organizations which were like trying to build in all the digital reality. The digital India was such a big mandate. And it was a mandate which was supposed to kind of come in over years, let's say the next 5 years or something. But the pandemic has kind of fastened the whole process, and it's already there. The people we never expected. I mean, now kids in the most interiors of India are studying on a phone. This was unimaginable even 2 years back. So this whole thing, the digital reality, augmented, virtual, mixed, 360-degree video, all of that, everything is story. So I want to start with 3 examples. It's a report by Deloitte, and they have figured, for example, Nat Geo has made their Spectator part of their stories. So through this AI virtual reality, there's a Nat Geo program in which you can experience how it can be if you're almost getting eaten up by a tiger or attacked by a rhino. In military school, in US Navy, they have created this whole thing through virtual reality for recruitment, how it would be in, places. It's called Nimitz. It's a traveling trailer. It's a VR experience, how it would be in a coverted mission. And when students kind of recruits were put into it, a lot of them said, no, this is not my cup of tea. So there's a psychological aspect they are able to gauge and understand. I think the pandemic showed to us the kind of charitable donations which happened, the stories which are being told. Like, we common people rose to really becoming the real warriors, essential workers becoming real warriors. Each one of us did our bit, and we all donated by listening to stories, helping people get resources.
And sometimes, Piali, these stories were really short, but they really reached us,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it would be an Instagram story. It would be a Twitter reel. It would be a short format video. So, but it will have a ripple impact. So I really see that things have changed. And in Cannes line this year, 2021, the YouTube trend report also kind of brings into play what is the difference in storytelling which has happened. Now, the listener and the spectator are not anymore different, they have become merged into each other. And what you see is, like, I really feel that content, how it's being created for the Gen Z and the millennials. They are the biggest, consumers of it. We are not anymore the mainstay of content. So if you see data, it says that YouTube is the greatest place for this video format consumption. So Facebook has already been relegated to, old people status. Old people go there. Because Forbes has done a study, Asian School of Journalism has done a study, and what they see is that now young people are drawn to things which are extremely important is relatability, deep connectedness. Then the most important thing is something which is relevant, meaningful, authentic. So the kind of thing which you see for an Instagram story or a OTT platform show, which really, really appeals to young people, Money Heist and Breaking Bad and all of that, but they don't feel like that about the mainstream hero-led, Bollywood stories anymore. It's just gone. That mega star syndrome has completely gone. So they want real. They don't want the curated stuff. Brands, how they tell their story now anymore. You cannot just go and sell your product directly. So you made to go. If you go through the IKEA India Instagram page or a Uniqlo page, you will see people, couples wearing their clothes, drinking tea in their cup of coffee, and those things are tagged as products, but nobody is directly selling because everything is happening through a story. So they also don't like curated stuff. They like things to be messy. Cold marketing has completely gone away. And everybody's trying to say, how do I become relevant and I continue to kind of to grow? So they are the Gen Zs, millennials are in their sweatshirts, in their t-shirt. They don't have makeup anymore. They are the ones who are calling out all the body dysmorphia and all the fake culture of editing and all of that. So there is a change. People are wearing shorts under a t-shirt. Like I have worn a sari for a conference today, but otherwise I wouldn't do that anymore. So that relevance of, yeah, it is okay to be real has happened. And the stories have become more and more realistic, more and more connectedness, more and more authenticity is extremely important. And see, now you see the video story which you hear is people are attending weddings on Zoom, on YouTube. People are attending graduation. I was invited to a funeral. So then what do? The whole topography, the ethnography of content has completely shifted. You know, with that BTS, which is Korean hip hop, they made a video where recently, which is basically 1 hour of streaming and animated butter being melted with no sound. But their fans got onto the live chat and talked with each other. You know, that's what happened. There's a thing called hip hop lo-fi. It's an animated girl in very cozy places, sitting on her bed, sitting on her chair with her dog, sitting by the window. There's a basic like background music happening. So people play it to kind of find focus. There are people who are jamming on music. There is an app now where, you know, if you want to learn an instrument, it's like my husband has taken to playing the guitar. So there's an app where he goes on and people like him are like just putting on things where you can see them playing the strings and you can see the strings being played. So it's a great community which you're building. So content and storytelling has become about authenticity and building community in a very, very authentic way. And those superficial, big, larger than life stories are not relevant. I mean, that's what I see for now. Yeah.
So I'm sure Himanshu is listening to that very carefully because he's the one who's behind the apparatus. But now I'm going to move to Murtaza, and for the audiences, I must share with you that you know, every time I read something that Murtaza writes on a film, I'm captured. So there is one storytelling that the filmmaker does, and then there is the way Murtaza weaves his interpretation. So Murtaza, like many people who follow you on social media, you can imagine I'm also one of them, and it's fascinating to see your work. Murtaza, you know, we've had this great beginning. I mean, Pankaj sir just set the stage with the Dan Harmon circle, and you know, we almost were making notes.
I got picked up for my next class, probably for one of my classes.
Absolutely.
Myself, you know.
Absolutely. And I think what Piali said is so relevant, that here is a spectator whose mindscape is different. You know, the person experiencing something else in their own lives, the entire washing away of, you know, the artificiality of the use of the apparatus. Absolutely. Murtaza, you've constantly commented on the good story and the bad story. I've read so many of your articles. Sometimes you've complimented a director, you know, for constructing it very well. Sometimes you've also taken a stance where you've compared text across years, you know, and this comparison is very critical because, like I'm again saying, in a lot of the episodic storytelling that I see, very easily storytellers appropriate, you know, collective memory, and you know, so they also know they are talking to an informed spectator. That is also very interesting. So in this day and age, how would you say that somebody's reached home? You know, it's a good intent, and you know, the serial or the web series has reached home. For example, like in Patal Lok, you and I had this conversation last time. And where do you as a film critic say, you know, think, you know, they tried, but they haven't reached there? So what will be your comments on that?
Firstly, Dr. Chakravarti, I must say that this is the most opportune moment for a conversation like this because, you know, in the last month itself, you know, we have had some amazing stuff, you know, coming out, you know, across platforms. And I just don't want to say the giants, you know, so to say. I'm also speaking of YouTube, you know, Payali touched upon YouTube being, you know, and let's not forget that Aspirants, which has been one of the biggest shows, you know, in the recent months, came out on YouTube, TVF show. and the kind of success that it has attained, and it has made stars overnight, like Sunny Hinduja and FTI, and you're sharing your alumnus, and he has really become
He's
big.
a good friend of mine.
He's become
We
so
work
big.
together.
Lovely, wonderful. So he's become so big with that character of Sandeep Bhaiya, who is like a sensation. I was reading memes wherein people were saying that just like there used to be memes that why did Katappa kill Bahubali, there are now memes that did Sandeep Bhaiya clear UPSC, which is actually relevant to a great extent, because after the 4th episode, everybody was waiting for the 5th episode, and TVF had made it mandatory that unless they touch the magical figure of 10 million subscribers, they're not going to release it. But they were under such tremendous pressure that they had to release before having reached the 10 million mark. So that's the kind of success that a show like Aspirants has attained. But speaking of the avant-garde, Dr. Chakravarti, it has always been there. If we go back in time, there was Maya Deren, in the early days. There was always, Salvador Dali. There was Luis Buñuel. All those things were happening. There was Fellini, in the 60s and 70s. So avant-garde has always been there. There was Manikol, speak of India. Before that, there was Ritvik Ghatak, who was, doing some amazing stuff with form. So form has always been there. And the good thing is that it has always been evolving. And nowadays, the thing is that it's becoming a little more mainstream, because now people have got access to internet. And because of that, now it is becoming sort of a mainstream, it is finding more and more eyeballs as it would have probably in the earlier times. But what is most exciting right now is how intertextuality is working at different levels. Take the case of Ray, the Netflix series, which is based on 4 of Satyajit Ray's short stories. Now, these short stories are set in probably 60s or 50s, and they are still very, very relevant. But what the makers have done is that they have tried to, readapt it to the times we live in. For example, if I give you the case of Hangama Kyun Hai Barpa, which is a short story directed, which is a Satyajit Ray short story, which has been directed by Abhishek Chaubey into this segment of Ray, which is a 4-part anthology series, and how he has blended different ideas. He has brought in ideas of, Urdu poetry. There is ghazal. There is the idea of theater, proscenium stage, and all that. So much is happening there. Even the sets are like stage. I was talking to Manoj Vajpayee only recently, and he was telling me how they were able to think it at a level wherein they were not thinking of the medium as such. They were thinking of ways to transcend the medium. Like, what can be the content that not just caters to, say, just OTT or cinema, or say just a screen viewing experience, but also brings in elements from literature, which it was anyway, also bringing in elements from music, also bringing in elements from poetry, also bringing in elements from theater. So it's a great mix. And when you watch something like Hangama Kyun Hai Barpa, you feel that this is really the next level of content in the mainstream space. Yes, avant-garde, a lot of amazing stuff is happening. Apps are always there. But even in the mainstream space, something like Hangama is happening. Then look at other Ray stories. For example, this one called Forget Me Not with Ali Fazal. Now, this story of Ray had no female character at all. But right now, when it's been adapted, it's actually speaking to the times we live in. It speaks to the Me Too culture, the Me Too movement. And it's such a powerful statement of what happens in office spaces, what goes around in office spaces. And the way it was able to establish dialogue with, what was happening over the last 2-3 years, I really found it fascinating. Even though as a story, it may be inferior to what Ray, put it on paper. But, if you look at the bigger picture, how it had a constant dialogue with the Me Too movement and the times we live in, I thought, it was very, very relevant to the times we live in. And let's also think about a series which is slightly, different from Ray, but also, in a very interesting space. And it's basically a Turkish series called Irtagul. Somebody spoke about content made in South Africa. The Turkish content is also doing wonderfully well. And the Turkish have a very different episodic style. They are like, believe a very, very long structure of episodes, which goes up to 50, hundreds. And people are going crazy about that, because there's a certain sense of relatability. People are able to relate to the kind of content that's been offered, in the overseas spaces. Because right now, we are not just limited to, our own space. The internet has brought the world. It has now become a global village. So because of that, if you contrast something like, Ray, to something like Irtugul, there is a huge contrast out there, and there's viewership for both. And also there is viewership for a film like maybe Salman Khan film, which is now releasing on Z5 for a change, Radhe. So very diverse space we are in, and as a critic, I take keen interest in all of this. And let's not forget that the American space is also going through a transformative phase. Earlier we used to have the Breaking Bads of the world, but right now even the superhero stuff is happening on OTT. Disney Hotstar is coming up with stuff like WandaVision, which is groundbreaking in its own way. It's actually a kind of a genre, superhero genre, which is paying tributes to the sitcoms of the 50s and 60s. That's very interesting for me. Look at Loki. It is now bringing the idea of hard-boiled fiction into the space of superhero. So this intermingling of ideas that's now happening is really going to be the game changer. And I'm not only talking about the mainstream space. I'm not even touching about the avant-garde space. So right now, I think this is the most exciting time in probably, this is the first time, in a very long time that the world of content has opened up in such a big way. And only 3 years back, we had Sacred Games. And I was at the premiere and I thought, okay, I was not sure that what is going to be the future of OTT. But 3 years down the line, especially triggered by the pandemic, cinema halls having shut down, this is really, becoming very big. And as the figures were put by Pankaj sir, it has already grown thrice in number. And I won't be surprised if by next year, if this number probably increases by 10 times.
Thank you, Murtaza. I think, again, we were making notes. We were trying to understand what you watch and how you're observing storytelling from your stance as a film critic. Now, last but not the least, we have somebody who is there, who actually captures these images, who actually, and let me also share something informal about Himanshu, is that when he is a team member, I've never seen him just act like a cinematographer. He is part of the process of the story construction. And therefore, it's very important for someone like him to be on this panel. Because, I'm sure that there are young directors, there are teams there out there in Mumbai, they're conceptualizing. And I want to understand from you, Himanshu, is that whenever you engage in the process of storytelling these days, knowing very well that, there is, the equipment has obviously also got democratized. The equipment has also got simplified and yet not simplified, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you, as somebody, and I will not, call you a cinematographer at the moment, but maybe somebody who's a visualizer, somebody who visualizes these ideas, what is your stance on the current, developments?
Okay. Hello, everybody. I am super nervous because Pankaj sir and Gauri ma'am are my teachers, and it's just once you're a student and then you have a face to like teachers in your head, that it never goes away. It's just no matter what you're in a classroom, you see those people and you're back in the classroom. And it's amazing how I get to share a platform where I'm talking next to them. Thank you so much. It's an amazing privilege. So I think I wanted to go a bit into my version of what I think story is, and then how I try and incorporate that into when I create images, and then how that eventually gets into the bigger space. So I think, according to me, story is, in the simplest form, information given in a specific order. And the order becomes crucially important. It's like a joke. If you say the joke wrong, nobody's going to laugh at it. And which is what separates from good storytelling versus not so good storytelling. The same information, the same story, when given in the correct order, where the storyteller gives you the time to process every information and then moves on to the next bit of information, that keeps you hooked on and engaged to the process. You break that order, you make the audience wait for a little too long, you're scared of them losing interest. You do it too early and they've not digested the earlier bit that you've just given it to them, and now you've wasted the punch that was coming next to you. So, and even at the most simplest form, at the very basic level, this stays the same, no matter you're telling the biggest, most elusive and most grand story out there, or you're telling just a very simple story of this poor girl trying to do something in a village. The idea at the very basic stays the same, that you have to tell that story, and the order of that information that comes to the viewer decides of how the story is going to be absorbed. So how much information and how soon does it come to the viewer becomes crucial when you're talking about telling a story. And simplifying it to the process of right to from where you do it in a frame. Like when I set a frame, or when I design, for example, if I'm doing a discussion with the director of approaching a particular scene, and then we break down into the number of shots that we're going to do. So finding the right place to do the master shot, and then getting on to how we are going to cover the various scenes. It again comes down to the same process, that within my frame, our eyes, as you look at a picture, you look at anything, our eyes never see the entire picture in one go. Our eyes travel around in an image. You see a picture, any picture, and you can ask yourself, what is the first thing I noticed about that picture? And there'll be one specific thing, be it moving images or be it still images, that you notice in that, and your eyes travel along that imagery along the screen. It's just that you do it so fast that end of the day, what your brain perceives is a collection of all the information that you gather within that fraction of a second when you looked at the image. But, and this is what I find the most exciting about my job here, is that I can actually guide the eye to go from one to another aspect as I want. I want you to notice this person's face at this given moment. I have the power to make you go there exactly. Or maybe not yet. Maybe I don't want you to go to the person's face just yet. Maybe I want you to notice that there's something kept next to the person. And then the person is fidgeting with something else. And then maybe I land up to the face. Now, this order of how this information comes to you, I think makes all the difference of how we perceive stories in terms of when we are consuming content. How a certain content speaks to us comes into this. So you have to choose what you're drawing your user, your reviewer's eye to. How long do you want to stay, and where do you want to go next? And you make these choices per frame, then per shot. Then within a shot, you look at the entire scene of the choices that you've made. You do the collection of the scene, then you come up to the whole episode of how you do it. And within that episode, then you put that entire episode into the 8-episode thing that you're shooting. And then you look at the choice again that you made in that one frame. How does it hold into the story that I'm going to tell in 8 episodes now, 240 minutes of content that I'm going to now create?
I see a lot of value in what you're saying, Himanshu. I mean,
so
really,
what happens is that,
yeah.
So every time I am framing, for example, I've shot features, and with features, there's a certain sense of when the way you schedule the features is that you're probably not going to come back to that space again. A lot of features are designed in such a way that it's a very linear storytelling where you're probably not going to come back to the same situation again. It's just you go from one to another, and something ends.
Yes.
There's something end bit to it. When you do an 8-episode series where there's 240 minutes of content, you're going to come back to that space over and over and over again. Sometimes you'll come back to it in the 2nd episode, sometimes 4 times in the 3rd episode, 6 times in the 5th episode, and then maybe in the last episode. Now, if I have to explore the same space 20 times over 240 minutes of content that you watched, sitting maybe together in all one go or in another, how do I still make it relevant, and how do I still make it intelligently put together, and how do I still keep up with the growth that the character has gone through in the process? What I show in the 1st episode, first 2 minutes, and then when I come back to that same space in the 7th episode, 5th or 10th minute, are same spaces, but they're not the same characters anymore. As Pankaj has already explained us, and that was also the part of my process also, that when you basically grow through the process of how now the challenge takes another level when you sometimes have to shoot in an order where episode 8 is going to be shot first. And then maybe the bits of episode 1 are going to be shot way to the end. So you have to pre-visualize and understand in terms of the film, there's a structure that you're going to follow. that how am I going to be into this? How I'm going to treat this? So a lot of homework, a lot of pre-visualization, a lot of discussion, a lot of planning goes into this process of first formulating of what kind of formal structure are we looking at? Are we going to follow it? And like, for example, one of the shows that I shot, Rejects, it's for Z5. In the first season, there is a clear distinction of a present and past. There's a continuous timeline that keeps on jumping back and forth between present and past. And we realize that even though we have very specific marks of what's present and what's past, we wanted very specific formal structures to also be in place that remind you that, okay, we are in this space. So in terms of the technique, I had to come up with specific instances of, in one, I am using tracks and dollies and jibs, and there's crash zooms happening, and there's a lot of, and when we come to present, it's just static frames or handheld at the max. So as soon as you see the camera moving, floating, you know that, okay, we are talking about the past. As soon as you come back and suddenly the camera is not moving at all throughout the entire scene, it gives you that stability that, no, we are back to the present. So, and the thing is, all of this structuring of how the lighting works, or how I'm framing, or how I am choosing what camera movements am I going for.
And the added aspect of what Piali said of the, the realistic look, even that is part of your...
Yes. So in terms of, I think realistic also, I am always of the fact that reality still can be made into look aesthetic. There's a thin line to it, but there is. I don't have to put additional beautiful lighting to a process. I can just use set lighting, but just by making very little changes of where the actor sits, maybe a little closer to bulb or a little away from the bulb. Just by that, I can still make that very real, very believable picture slightly more aesthetic and more palatable for you to be consuming that story at a certain level. And at some point, I mean, as much as I don't know if I would hate to say it, my job is to make things look good.
Yeah.
And we as humans, no matter how much we go into it, good, like in terms of something that gives us comfort or something, when it looks a certain way, it changes our perception. No matter, I mean, we can agree or disagree to it to a certain degree, but we have an affinity towards how things look in a certain way. And
yeah, but Himanshu, what your comments have done is, and I'm sure the other three panelists have also, I mean, this is really very important what you've said. And I can already see another session kind of unfolding in the next ICAN on how the entire, the team, it's not just the person who's thinking of the idea, but how the team also has to be conditioned to this long story format.
Yeah.
And you're really indicating to that. And thank you for stating it, because sometimes we tend to bypass, this aspect. And I'm sure Murtaza will agree that there are, certain products, I mean, certain series where you notice that, they've lost it. In the sense that there's the frame is not sufficiently enamored with the cues that probably could have happened as they moved along.
Yes.
So that's great insight. Now, since we are talking of the Dyad, and I can already see that time is short. We haven't talked about, I'm sorry, I'm jumping, but we haven't talked about the short format. And so initially, I would just want all four of you to just quickly tell me what you think of the how the spectators consuming this very short format. And then there's something that I'm sure Pankaj sir has to share with us about characters, and I don't want the audiences to miss it. So all of those who are cued into this panel discussion right now, I wish I had this interactive tool where I could say, hands up, how many of you want to be cinematographers, how many want to be, one of you want to be audiographers, directors, then I would have said, notice what the panel is saying. This is beyond what meets the eye. There's more to this than meets the eye. So Himanshu, back to you again. Let me go in the reverse. Your views on how what you're saying now, compare it to the other side of the system. The Insta story, short.
So Yeah, so what I've noticed, and this is my personal experience with all my friends and everybody, is that when you think of watching a show, it's a certain sense of commitment that you have, because you're going to put in like 8-10 hours of it in it. Picking, like just scrolling through the Netflix is like 2 hours that people spend on before they can actually commit to start watching a show. But what I've seen is that the shorter format content, which you can just swipe through on your phone, becomes this in between breaks that people use it a lot, like waiting for something or doing something, that they just consume like the 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes of content,
Short format video, yes.
or even comes to, like, if you talk about reels, then 10 seconds, 15 seconds of content that becomes really interesting for that matter. And for you, it's a very quick, short commitment that it just goes, and it gets absorbed really quickly, because it's probably one person doing the sketch, acting as two different people, having a very relatable, and this is where it comes to very relatable context, because I think the most popular channels or the most popular people who are doing this and are doing really well, they over and over come back to very relative content of what do parents say, or things that your parents say, or things that teachers do, and think, the simplest of the contents. A lot of them are really simple and silly. They just make you laugh, but you enjoy that and you keep coming back to it over and over again. And I am now noticing that there's a sense.
Has expectations, Himanshu. Even with the shorter one, you're very right. Daily occurrences. But the expectation is there that the story has to be embedded.
Yes. And I have had a lot of my friends who do this, and I have actually helped them into the classic schools of filmmaking, brought into the shorter content. For example, when they talk to each other quickly, a lot of times they miss the eye line bit. So they're looking frame left and then again frame left. And then when I watch them, like, hey, you can improve on this. And the next reel, then they make it, then they know it and they've already used it. And now they're looking at, as if they're looking at each other. And immediately the magic has happened. Now it's a very believable story out there. And then it struck me that there is so much more potential here, because it's little bits. It's what we do as
I agree.
Are really little bits, real little notes that we do of how you can just improve upon this. And suddenly there's a 15-second content that is so effective that you watch it at least 20 times and just laugh at it, because it's just very, very, very relatable. And I found this very good common ground where a lot of what we do in our classic mainstream system, bits of it, you teach it, or it just comes into the smaller system, and you have a whole new section of a lot of stories being told directly from people who are part of it.
Maybe it'll unfold. We don't know how, it'll unfold in the next 6 months, the next 8 months. Piali, your quick comments on this short format, like you mentioned, the short video format, the memes.
Yeah, so, in the short format, I would like to take the example of, it's a placeholder example of the Instagram and Facebook stories and reels, which has been disruptive completely in how it has been playing out, First example is, again, I go back to COVID-19, the second phase, the kind of help where normal, local people like us could get and could, bring people together to help each other was through Instagram stories and reels. There is a whole generation of new young people who have been told to kind of tone down their personality, look at what is, the binary is now is kind of redundant, and all of that has become like a great way to express themselves, their personality, their gender, their attitude, their perspective on things. And see, these are things which are not there for posterity. You do it and it disappears after 24 hours. Filters. There's a huge thing Snapchat is working with is filters. So why is it so pertinent? Because the filter also gives you kind of helps you to understand the psychological aspect of storytelling, which is a huge element of it. Is there's a mirroring, there's a neuron coupling which is happening. See, we connect to people, we connect to influencers. This whole genre of influencers is basically running the show of this short form format of Instagram stories. All these influencers are, people who don't come from pedigree families, acting backgrounds, any kind of training, but they have this great followership and they run the show. Their recommendation, everything is like so influential. And also the element of troll, how powerful the people, even the comments, the comment section has become. You have seen now that a lot of people, when they face criticism, have limited their comments. That means there is something happening in the storytelling, So, my favorite, as Pankaj sir says, South African stories. So my favorite author is Chimananda Adichie. And she says, we are not a single story. There are multiple stories. So I would just say that this is a time where there's a scope for a character to have multiple stories, and they've been told simultaneously. There's immediacy, there's authenticity to it. The short format really is a boon to that section of people, and influencers are kind of, and you see the biggest and the smallest doing the same, and we do it. We document our life. We go out, we document it. So it's happening everywhere. Everybody's telling that story.
Wow, I'd love to know more about this. Excellent. So Murtaza, your comments, does this short story fascinate you? Or yeah.
So Dr. Chakravarti, to add to what Himanshu said, I think he touched upon a very pertinent point that you can make a little adjustment and you can make things, more aesthetic. You can make it more presentable. For this, I need you to take you back into time to the silent era. I have always felt that sound somewhere has made people lazy. It made creators lazy. It made them, too much dependent on sound. It made them too much dependent on dialogues. So the visual aspect somewhere, they got disappeared, or they become somewhat secondary. When Truffaut wrote to Hitchcock that I want to do an interview with you, he simply said to Hitchcock that, I know there would be very, very few filmmakers who would still be relevant if today's sound suddenly disappears out of filmmaking, and one of them would be you. And Hitchcock got so happy, and that he invited Truffaut for that long interview, which is now out in form of his book, Hitchcock Truffaut. But why I pointed this out is because with the advent of reels, with the advent of stories, now we are again going back to the old, importance of the visual. Sound is just now rehashed, and you are doing some new stuff with it. But visually now you are paying more and more attention. The attention span anyway, is reducing, and the viewers are now just always keeping their eyes on the frame. And now you are once again, you are again thinking at the frame level. So the laziness is going out of the window. You are becoming more creative. You are finding more ways to somehow, match this this attention span that's been, getting lesser and lesser with each time. So I feel that the shorts and the short format, because of the fact that it's most democratic, it's actually revitalizing the art form, in a 360-degree manner.
Awesome. So Pankaj sir, that brings me to you, and you're already at 5:01, but I'd like the organizers to give us another 3-4 minutes, because I really know there's something you're going to share, which is going to really change the way we look at storytelling, and especially at characters. So over to you, sir.
I'm going to pick up from where Piali said. It's like a game of poker, and I'm taking something off from the table. So Piali, these pied pipers of Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, these sutradhars of Instagram and Twitter, this is the unique thing which is common to all OTT platforms as well. They were nobodies, right? Where was a Jaideep Elawat? Where was a Rasika Dugal? Where was a Pankaj Tripathi? I mean, they were literally nobodies, and look at who they are today. Look at a Priya Bapat in City of Dreams, right, on Disney Hotstar. Marathi actress, very limited appeal, and look at where they are today. So what has the OTT platform done? It has leveled the playing field. It has thrown the star system into the dustbin where it rightly belongs. It's been a great equalizer. And what has emerged is the story is the king, content is the king, characters matter. If you don't have characters, you don't have a story. If you look at Ashram, look at what Ashram has done to the sagging, almost lost career of Mr. Bobby Deol, right? Look at the way he's played that character. Even though it's we know who that character is crafted from, you still want to believe in that character, right? You still empathize and you still relate to that character. And that's what the OTT platforms have brought us from across the globe. Very interesting, very varied, but very, at some level, relatable characters. Because characters, you have to be able to empathize with them. You have to be able to relate with them. You have to be able to engage with them. And a character is engaging when we are interested in knowing his or her struggles. And we want to move forward with them or backwards with them. But we want, there is the Joker in Batman series, the Dark Knight series. He's so cool. He's dressed up in a nurse's uniform, blown up the entire hospital, and is walking out without a care in the world. There is Don Corleone, there is the Godfather. From time immemorial, you want to be like him. There is a certain aspiration level, right? And when I'm talking about content and the end of the system, the star system, I also quickly, Gauri, want to bring in a very salient point. Since Murtaza talked about it, touched upon it, he spoke about Manoj. Murtaza, there was a time when Manoj was assisting Barry John and me when we directed a series for Doordarshan. He and Lovely and Mishra were our two assistant directors at that time. And since you do a lot of work with News Laundry, and Madhu is one of the owners of News Laundry, I'm a part of the team that set up News Track and hence TV Today, 1988. We were the first 10 employees of a company called TV Today, registered at K9 Connaught Place, which is their sales and marketing office for India Today at that time. What I'm trying to tell you is sequels. Gauri, very important thing in sequels. If you look at all our recent sequels, all of them have not done so well. Family Man 2, I'm glad you're agreeing with me, Murtaza, you're a critic. You look at Family Man 2, you look at Out of Love 2, you look at Four More Shots, they've all bombed, right? There is a ordinary detective series called Bosch, and I am glued to it for 5 seasons. I enjoyed it immensely. I was talking to Gauri this morning and I said, it's a totally chick flick, if you'll forgive my misogynistic term, but that's what it's popularly called Bold Types on Netflix. I've sat through all 5 seasons because I just wanted to see it. I wanted to see where they take this amazing bonding between these 3 young girls in a very modern today's world, working for a magazine that speaks, for a very forward-looking women's magazine, right? But I want to see these characters move. I want to see what their progress is. I want to relate to them. They're so relatable. I can imagine them, right? I can imagine understanding where they're going from, what's happening to them. And that is the beauty of our characters today. That is what we are writing today. I spoke about this. Rasika Duggal is my favorite go-to person when you look at characters, Gauri. You look at her in Mirzapur, you look at her in Out of Love, you look at her in Delhi Crime.
Manto.
And Manto. No, I'm talking about OTT.
Okay.
Right?
Talking about the web series.
Web series, right? And look at the different characters she's gone through. She just dons different hats and slips into them with great ease. Right? She's the wronged wife in Out of Love.
But I think what I'll do is, because we are short of time,
sorry,
I think you very pertinently mentioned that it's not just to have a long format. So we started the Dan Harmon theory, but it's also important, keeping all the views in mind, that you just don't need the long format to be there in one go. It has to be then, if you're looking at seasons, it has to maintain its rigor, and that may be another challenge for the storytellers.
Gauri, one sentence, just to put it better. You see, in a short format, unlike in a film format, you have many threads, many tracks, as we call them, right? Many backstories. And the beauty in a short format is I can pick and drop those formats, those threads in any given episode and pick them up later in the series. A film doesn't have that luxury. So, how we weave these threads into the wonderful tapestry, it keeps us going for different seasons.
And so I think that is what's going to be the challenge that one sees in the next few months, because we have reached this space, and let's see now how the maker and the spectator, again how their interests collide, and how we see the landscape evolving from here.
For example, I'm dying to see what Special Ops Season 2 looks like next year. Wonderful, wonderful production value.
Yeah. Murtaza wants to
say something.
Coming out with an intro of that character, the KK Menon character, probably the people. But one show that I forgot to mention, and I recommend it highly if anybody hasn't watched it, it's The Underground Railroad by Barry Jenkins, which is on Amazon. Fine examples of long form storytelling, probably in the last half a decade or so.
And Murtaza will be very grateful if you also put it on the chat box, so that all our young audiences can keep a track. And with that note, I would like to close this panel discussion here. We had lots more to discuss, and this is one group of 4 people that I can keep talking to, but I will refrain myself and keep up to the time as the moderator, and must finish by saying that Amrisa, ma'am, Shashibala ma'am, thank you so much. ये सिर्फ एक मौका हमें, it's not just a panel. For me, it's also learning, and each one of us are taking back something to our scope of understanding this medium. So over to you, Sikriti, and thank you so much to DME for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you, Gauri.
Thank you so much, ma'am, and all the members on the panel, because this was honestly one of the most engaging discussions, and I did not want it to stop if only the clock was not telling me to. We do have certain questions from the participant, if we can take just 1 or 2 of them. We have a question asking, how do the platforms which use AI to study what we like and watch to give us content with specific intention for us to keep watching affect stories and storytelling formats?
What is happening, Sukriti, is that there are major data mining points, and AI does use that for viewership very, very often. If you notice today, I mean, whoever the person who's put this question, Netflix has a feature saying if you do not know what you want to see, it has something called play something. And if you click on that, it'll take you to something that you left off from, that you haven't finished seeing, or it'll play back something very akin to what you've been watching over the last 1 month. So they are using this very, very effectively, at least Netflix is. They're much more advanced than other platforms in terms of using generic AIs and UI, their user interface. And their data mining is excellent. Right. I hope that answers the question, Sukriti.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
So another aspect of this will be that, instead of all the TRP ratings of a very our earlier broadcast system, now your Sukriti, to the person who's asking, now the number themselves are so reflective of where it's going. So one thing is what Pankaj is saying. The other thing is that going digital has helped in this way, that the production ecosystem recognizes those stories which yield more footfalls. And I'm sure Himanshu, being part of that system, will agree that this is what puts the money on the next project. So in terms of the cues to the storyteller, this is also a fact that this is a more transparent way, apart from the fact that the system gives you a cue on what to watch next.
So Gauri, this helped Z, because let's say Salman's Radhe released on Z5, and they knew exactly how many people saw the film.
Yeah.
So this is a very accurate, and thank you for bringing it up. This is a very accurate and honest way of judging eyeballs. Right? You can't be.
And then, sir, content takes precedence.
Oh, absolutely.
There was a time when people would fudge up on these numbers, but now what happens is, so it's not AI directly that I'm relating to, but I'm talking about the larger context of technology,
Yeah.
you can't fudge up anymore. You can't, you can't do the PR bit to get through bad content anymore.
Agreed. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. The next question I have is from Ishika Wadhwa, our student anchor. She wants to know whether, if you think that vlogging or other short storytelling formats, which are more user generated, will take over completely the physical storytelling formats.
I think
Not
this
referring
Piali
to-
should answer this one because Piali dabbles into these spaces.
So it's a great question, and yes, physical storytelling is something which I do, and in my workspace I use it in different formats. One is to kind of work with audiences, where you kind of work with behavior. I also help use storytelling to create my plays, use it in my documentary. I use it in working with businesses to find creative solutions. But what I see is now there is a immersive experience where the lines have diluted. So this is not like one way. It's a mix of AI, virtual, physical, and offline coming together. A big example would be, there is a documentary on Netflix called Seaspiracy. It's about basically how this fish industry is destroying the whole ecology and the farming of salmon and everything. Tuna is it's like how it is done like in a terrible way, and how we do not know what we consume, and it's actually bad for our health. They not only made that documentary, it has won awards. They went on to run a campaign, people's campaign, where they, through public opinion in South American countries, the regulation for farming of tuna and salmon has changed. So see, storytelling is the most powerful device. And when you mix all those 360 degrees aspects in the physical form, on the content which we see consume as video, as an active form of taking call to action, and influencing community, influencing opinion, changing law, policy, all of that is coming together. So I think all will happen simultaneously. There's a simultaneity to it.
Thank you so much, ma'am. There is one more question that I have. This is coming from Miss Mudita. She is one of our faculty members. This was just mentioned in the discussion that, platforms like Snapchat are democratizing the content that we have. But Miss Mudita wants to know that, do you think that their filters kind of propagate a colonial mindset? Most of them are either trying to make us more fair, remove all of our blemishes from the face, or just beautify us in a very standardized format. So any comments on that? Do you think that this is what is being propagated by filters?
Yeah, Piali, you want to take that? I have a stance on the filters. I'm sure Himanshu also does, but Himanshu, would you like to comment on that?
I think
how
I
the
want to
filters
listen
kind
to
of,
what Piali has to say, because I have something, but I want to just understand what Piali has to say about this.
Okay, what I think that there is no one black or white to it. Of course, there is a dysmorphia, there is a whitewashing, and there is I don't want to name people, but let's say there is the Kardashians and the Kylie Jenners who do one thing, but also filters do a lot of other things to it. Somebody who's introverted, has disability, or wants to be seen, and doesn't want to be trolled for it. It also gives a space, a safe space to get represented. So it's up to us. I think now as everybody, Himanshu, Murtaza, Pankaj sir, Gauri, all of you mentioned that the spectator is very, very aware. So it's constantly making choices. Now you cannot control what others are doing, but there is a bubble, and there are various bubbles in which both are active. There's a thing called Clubhouse now. I'm sure all of you know, which is like chat rooms. You go, and the chat rooms can be extremely violent. They can be very misogynistic. But they can also be great places where people are discussing classical Hindustani music. Now, it's up to you how you use it. So I think it's up to us to discern what is right. Himanshu,
thank you so much for the responses.
Yeah, that was exactly where I was also wanted to just comment that If there is filters that make you fair, then there are filters that give you freckles. There are all sorts of filters. There are filters that make you fat. There are filters that make you look very funny. There are filters that change your entire. I mean, it's just everything is out there. So the choice that you make is about what you want to do with it, and not necessarily that's a problem. And I don't think any of these platforms are openly doing something about it, that this is what we are pushing for. And a lot of these filters are user created. They're not even like officially from the platform. These filters that you can create a filter and put it out there, and then if it becomes popular, everybody can use it. So there's everything from everywhere. It's like social media in general is. The choices you make is directly where you end up with, or where it's just a rabbit hole where you just keep making choices, and you end up down there. So I think it's just true with like everything else.
Thank you so much. You answered the question very satisfactorily, I'm sure. And now I think we should pay heed to the clock. And I would like my co-anchors, my students, Yogesh or Abhishek, who is available, to please take this from here. Thank you so much, all the panelists. It was a wonderful session. Yogesh, over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. We would like to extend my gratitude to our guests, Dr. Gauri Chakrabarti, Mr. Pankaj Rakesh, Ms. Pyari Das Gupta, Mr. Murtaza Ali Khan, and Mr. Himanshu Dubai for such an engaging discussion and for introducing us to their unique perspectives. We would now like to invite Professor Dr. Susmita Bala, Head DME Media School and Chief Associate Convener, ICAN4, to deliver the concluding remarks.
Thank you, Yogesh. It was a very interesting and enriching session. We all watch films, we watch TV series, we watch web series. We do it as ordinary viewers. After today's session, we as a viewer have grown now. Our understanding of short formats, very short formats, the episodic storytelling has increased. Thank you, Dr. Gauri Chakrabarti, for bringing such a rich panel to us. Thanks to all the panelists, Mr. Pankaj, Mr. Murtaza, Mr. Himanshu, and Ms. Piali. And of course, thanks to all participants present in this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your appreciative words. We would also extend our gratitude to Professor Dr. Amrish Saxena, Dean DME Media School and Convener ICAN4, and Professor Dr. Susmita Bala, Head DME Media School and Chief Associate Convener for the ideation and planning of all the sessions. We thank Ms. Manmeet Kaur, Dr. Manasvi Maheshwari, Ms. Shruti VS, Ms. Mudita Raj, and Mr. Mohammad Kamil for their constant support and guidance. We are also grateful to Mr. Ritik Ghosh, Mr. Sumantra Sarthidas, Mr. Sachin Nair, and Mr. Yogesh Sharma for providing the overall digital operations for ICAN4. We would like to thank the students and faculty members of our newsletter team, particularly Ms. Sukriti Arora and Dr. Teenam Gora for constantly supervising and coordinating the works. We thank Mr. Mohammad Kamil and Ms. Krishna Pandey for working around the clock for all the press proceedings. You can keep a check on our press proceedings on the official Facebook page of ICAN. Additionally, we would also thank Mr. Anmol Mehta from the DME family and Mr. Sumohit Nirala from one of our knowledge partners, K.R. Mangalam University, for tirelessly working to make our events look digitally beautiful with the help of their prolific designs. Thank you to our entire team of the Media School, all faculty members and students who have worked day and night, facing all the challenges and obstacles on the pandemic to make this conference happen. And lastly, we thank our audience who spared their times to join the session. Your feedback is very valuable to us. Please use the link in the chat box to let us know your views. We request everyone to follow our social media handles for more updates and information. Don't forget to visit the DME website and the ICAN4 website for any or all details. This session has been wonderful indeed, but that's not the end for the day. We will be back with the second half of the workshop on emerging technology in journalism, 360-degree virtual reality storytelling, practical and approachable at 6:30 p.m. IST. Till then, this is Yogesh Bist and Ishika Wadhwa taking your leave. Thank you.